I mean, we have some newspapers that will actually say woman gives birth to 50-pound fish. And
yes, of course. Well, that's part of the issue, isn't it? That scientific literacy may mean a more sort of slightly wider notion of this a state of mind, a way of thinking that does not just simply cave into to instant representations of so-called truth. And I'm just curious as to whether or not, I'm thinking back now, since we're now almost at the end of the conference, to the beginning, which was the idea that Michael Vesh put across about the power of social media as a potential countervailing force to the influence of the media. Because you could imagine a scenario where, let's get the row about MMR, you could see how it could be constructed so that social media might be a tool by which that media spin could be counterbalanced by a more
well, yes,
participatory form of knowledge exchange.
I think that's a separate issue, but I think I would rather that counter...
Or enhanced.
Or enhanced, yes.
Yeah,
I see. Oh, yes, of course. Mustn't forget that Murdoch himself will participate in the social media and spin it. Okay, we're lost.
I think my take on it, I mean, but you certainly see both of your points of view there. My take on it is that I would rather that happens inside the individual's mind and reasoning. I think that's what I would well. I'm not saying that the individual will not plug into what you're talking about. What I am saying is, it doesn't matter what the individual plugs into. If they don't have that basic terminology, they will not understand what the issues are.
All right.
And that's what my feeling is. Now, when we get to the other issue here, which I think the last slide that I had, which is I'm reasonably strong about, is that people do, I don't know how it happens, it's either inculcated by family or some reason or other, they actually don't believe that they can cope with science. Well, and I think part of this is that if I put, and I see this with return to learning students all the time on the access courses coming back into returning to education. If they are worried, if I put a mature student into a group discussing sociological issues or literature, they have that language, they have that conceptual vocabulary to participate to one degree or another. But if I put them into a biology class discussing cytology and ask them to tell me what the mitochondria does or what glycolysis is, they immediately see this new terminology and they go, whoa, not for me. Because it is like having to learn a new language. And so I think what we need to do is demystify. Still, we can't talk complex subjects with simple language. It's just not possible. The mechanic in the garage does not talk to another mechanic and say, the squidgy bit on the wiggly bit will do the gasket. He talks about the gasket and the distributor or whatever. And so when we approach science, it's a language that has to be learned in exactly the same way. Sure. And I think we as tutors must understand that from the outset. It's not sufficient to say, off you go with a book, there's the glossary, learn it. We have to get them confident in using it.
Science is not the only subject that has that issue.
No, I was going to say maths is a good example, isn't it?
No,
mathematical
what I'm
literacy.
saying is that science in most of the technical areas have a vocabulary that's not as easily accessible as the humanities and sociological.
Oh, I don't know. Try reading Foucault. In fact, I can't.
I agree. Sorry, you were going to...
Well, I think maybe part of the problem is us and how we teach science. I mean, students come at university in particular and see science as being a set of facts that's translated from somebody who's very on stage down to us neophytes who need to learn everything. And we don't engage enough in the process of science, understand these ideas of skepticism and evidence and critical questioning of all of that. And I think if we could do anything to change science literacy, I think changing the way that we educate that and bringing in more of the process, inquiry basis, and the active nature of how science is actually.
I mean, what we do is not so much. Well, we do it in terms of our undergraduate teachers, but what we do, particularly in the access course, is that throughout it's a year-long course and it's got study skills built into it, with the 3 sciences as well. And particularly, we ask for a 5,000 word project at the end of it, but they start that halfway through, and it's related to the subjects. And so and they get 2 weekly tutorials. So we're walking side by side with them in that. And it's really interesting to look at the levels of powers of inquiry develop and their writing skills all develop together until at the end, they're very often more knowledgeable about that tiny area that they've chosen to look at than the tutors involved tutoring. They've taken the process and applied it to their own interests, and I think that's a crucial thing to do. But I do like this idea of teaching in context, so that if one's talking about chemistry, then we want to link it to biology, and we want to link it to the real world, or physics and chemistry, and real world issues. And we're just currently talking about, in the course of the conference, in fact, how assessment might be involve a discussion of how science operates specifically in the area of science in terms of ESDGC. So I think what we've got to work on here with the whole ESDGC thing is, though, that very often you get responses. There is a big gap between belief and practice. You can get a lot of adults that will happily agree with everything we're saying here. Jump in the floor and go to the supermarket for a bag of crisps. And so there's that issue as well.
Ah, but there's a scientific literacy question there, which is that actually does giving up your 4x4 save the planet? That's a skeptic's question.
Well, of course, but I mean...
I'm entitled to ask it, aren't I? That's the thing about scientific literacy, is that the debate goes in two directions.
So, anyway, that was when I was trying to be serious about it. And really, it's just a lot of nonsense. I quite like plotting the mean against standard deviation to show the variation, but I mean, it's not possible with this kind of data. It's just nonsense. But so, however, I put up a couple of references here, and I'll stick this PowerPoint onto my UWN website, and we can maybe pick up on that, because it's actually something that I've had the privilege to develop with, because I went to the Yukon, I went to Whitehorse in 2000, and got a chance to see some real wilderness, and also got involved with Bob Drickling, who you may have heard of, with the environmental education aspect of things, and that kind of triggered me along this path, and it's kind of taking me down that route. So with those two publications, you might be interested to track the development of the ideas. But it is a burgeoning, blossoming subject, which there are many, many avenues to go down. And so I welcome any input by email or such like from any direction. And of course, I'm lucky enough to have constant opportunity to get input from colleagues here as well.
Yes, you can look forward to an extended debate, Ron.
Can I just ask you one last question? Why did you say there's a growing tendency of science not to be
Well, because people are grasping the ethical and sociological and philosophical issues of this no problem nowadays. That's the whole point about a socio-scientific issue. People are discussing these who are not interested in science because they leave that to somebody else, which is why one of the questions I pitched was environmental problems are better left to the experts to do something about. But it's actually, the experts will only do something about it because it's being driven by people from a sociological point of view. If you look at ESDGC literature, you'll find climate change and global warming is high on the agenda, and the rest is completely forgotten in the main. So what you're finding is that the true discussion for all this is going on outside of science, and science is standing back from it and allowing this. And I think this is either because there's a decline in scientific literacy, or scientists are seeing themselves as not part of the debate. Either way, I think that's crucial.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming along.